Hello, my name is Andrew Payton. I am doing my video on Domingos Fernandes Nobre. And in the 1560s, there was sugar plantations that were becoming the mainstay of Portuguese exploration in the Brazilian area. And what's interesting about Domingos Fernandes is that he was an in between. He had a native mother and a Portuguese father, and he was a slave trader, and he would kind of play both worlds. Whereas in Olinda and Salvador da Bahia, which was the capital at the time, that's where a lot of the Portuguese were living, or people that were excommunicated or wanted to leave Portugal came to Brazil to kind of start a new life. And what was interesting is that, like, his one side, he was Indian, and he would celebrate the Santidade cult, which was kind of like a local Indian cult where, according to the Catholic Portuguese, it was adulterous, and anything that wasn't anything specifically Catholic was hearsay and heretical. So that didn't go well when Inquisition from Portugal came in 1591. The reason for this was that it was important for the Portuguese to kind of see what was going on religiously, because that was one of their things, was to convert the native population to Catholicism. And so if you ate like Nombre did, like he ate during the Holy Communion meat, or he was involved in a slave trade, things that kind of went against the Catholic Church, did not look well for him. But the reason we have all this information is as a primary source in his Inquisition trial of 1592. He finally had to repent his sins because he didn't want his property taken away and be excommunicated. So all we have what the Portuguese have it from their Inquisition, but I don't know if it's fully accurate, because they're very biased, and if you're not fully Portuguese or following certain rules, I feel like they definitely painted him to be a heretic, because when he was in the Indian sect, he had tattoos to show he was a strong warrior, and it was kind of like this go-between. He was trying to survive and adapt to that world so he can gain their trust, enslave them, and bring them over to Bahia, which was the capital of Portugal's Brazilian colony. So it was very interesting. And what happened that was big problematic is that a lot of the native population was dying from diseases. There was no immunities or immunizations to prevent certain diseases. So once the native population died down, this go-between kind of world lost its value, because that's when the Atlantic slave trade became much more frequent, especially in the Americas, because in Africa they were more immune to diseases, because they were so close to Europe and Asia, whereas in the Americas they were so segregated for so many years that they didn't get the chance to biologically develop any resistance to diseases brought by the Portuguese or the Spaniards. I will say that there was 3 quotes that stuck out to me. He claimed on page 71, he claimed to have kept the Catholic faith in his heart. His behavior suggests he adapted whichever religious practices best suited the occasion. And what that means to me is that he had that Catholic faith instilled in him, but he wasn't perfect, and he made mistakes. And in his slave trade, he had to adapt to the Indian way of life as well, the native Indian way of life, because he wouldn't be able to gain their trust, to be able to gather them, to enslave them to work on these sugar plantations. So he's kind of stuck in both worlds, and he ended up losing in both worlds at the same time. On page 72, the Inquisitor was willing to forgive their past behavior, yet was not allowing them to return to the wilderness to make a living, and which is so important, because this is one of the hypocrisies of the Catholic Church. I'll forgive you, don't worry, but at the same time, you can't make money the way you used to. You can't do certain things. It's against the religion. And so it was held against. It said, okay, so you kind of forgive me, but you're not allowing me to make a living that I've been doing my whole life. So now what exactly am I supposed to do? You're not really giving me any tips here. So I think that's a little hypocrisy in the Catholic Church, but I won't get too much into that. Domingos Fernandes Nobre Tomacauna, which was his native Indian name, confessed his dual identity as Portuguese and native Indian. And this was on page 70. And this meant that he was both. I mean, he was allowed to be both, but he was living in a time that was very judgmental, very segregated, very set in their ways. Like the Inquisition just happened in Spain. Portugal followed behind. Ferdinand and Isabel pretty much got rid of the Jews and the Muslims after years and years and years of a war that was completely unneeded. That goes into Crusades, another unnecessary, but besides the point. So I learned a lot because it was interesting to see the dual identity and how he survived and adapted to his environment. But I also felt like, what was the Catholic Church expecting him to do? He confessed and they still wanted him to what? Like, I felt like, oh, they didn't really forgive him. They just kind of said, you can't make a living. You were still a heretic. We still believe you did certain things. So you're never really going to be fully Catholic, but we forgive you to an extent. I don't know. It was weird. I wouldn't have appreciated that, but at that time he needed to survive, didn't want to lose his property. And the fact that like six, I think it was 14 people, including one of his wives, sold him out. It was super unnecessary. That would be something I look into too, those interpersonal relationships that someone you're supposed to love and people you're supposed to care about just completely backstab you and throw you away. That was pretty disgusting. So I think it goes both ways, but I do think that it's important to kind of evaluate what was Catholic Inquisition from Portugal really intending for. Was the primary source in their Inquisition not biased? I think it was a little biased. I think there was some accuracy too, but I think they wanted to hear certain things, and when they didn't hear it, they didn't like it. So yeah, that's what I have to say about this module. I think it was a really good one, and thank you.